Hello and welcome back to another episode of Unlocking Your Financial Future. I'm Ben Schrock, and joining me on today's episode is Dan Oakleaf. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Don't think you had a choice, but
hey, it's all right.
We all have a choice. So in part one, we talked about the changes and updates in Social Security, specifically cost of living adjustments, what everyone can expect. Again, lack of information in terms of the Medicare Part B increase, but as soon as we get catch wind of that, we can let everyone know. Today, we're going to talk about kind of year-end planning, more from a taxation standpoint, and then what to look at in 2025. And as Dan mentioned on the previous close of last podcast, 2025 is a big year. You know, the tax laws as we know them today, if there is no extension, they sunset or expire.
Right.
So a lot of opportunity. And, Dan, I guess give us kind of the brief overview of where we are tax-wise today, why 2025 is such an important year, and what we're kind of looking at, I guess, with potential changes.
Yeah, so the two big changes we focus on that may be upcoming are the marginal tax brackets will change back to the pre-2016 brackets, but we don't think in our office that that's the biggest difference. We truly believe that the standard deduction will go back to what it was, which is a huge deal because right now, 2024, married filing jointly pre-65, that standard deduction for people is $29,200. Now, why it's important to know that is if these do sunset the way we think they may, that gets pretty much cut in half. So that actually will make a difference on every single person's return who aren't itemizing over that number, because in the past, it's already been 8 years. It's been very hard for married filing joint, unless you own a business, to itemize over that amount. So that's going to cause a little bit of a difference when people go to file their taxes for the tax year 2026. Is they got to get used to the new federal tax brackets, but also that lowered standard deduction. So those are two things we're looking at in our office that make the biggest differences when we sunset back.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of speculation with the upcoming election, and that's not our job today is talk about the election because we don't have that enough time. But the job is really to look at it from the reality of the situation. The rhetoric out there is if Trump gets in, he's going to extend. If Harris gets in, the tone is kind of shifted now to where she gets in. She's not going to just blow it up. She's may take bits and pieces of what she likes and create a new one. All that being said is, remember, a sunset provision is just an expiration. So if nothing's done in Washington, it goes back in time.
Right.
Now, I would have to believe that this is a big undertaking. This isn't something either administration could wait till Q4 of 2025 to make that decision, right?
Right.
I would have to assume, Dan, and I don't know what your thought is on this, but my assumption was Q1, maybe Q2 at the latest, till they get something, some sort of reform done to create some sort of new tax, because they need the time to put it in place, right?
Yeah, you kind of got to think they're going to have to lay some infrastructure on if they want to keep pieces and parts of it, which ones to keep, what do they think is the most important portion of the original tax cuts, and what will affect the average American, because there might be some situations where you don't really change from your tax bracket standpoint, but again, every person is going to feel that standard deduction who actually does not itemize. So that's going to be a very interesting kind of situation when we get to, once we get a semblance of a clue as to who's going to be in the office, how important is it on their agenda? So it's got to be pretty soon, because that's something that I don't think the government, frankly, moves fast on anything in general. So that's something they got to get figured out pretty quickly, whoever gets in from that perspective.
Yeah. So. And again, like you mentioned earlier, the brackets change. It's not like a huge change or huge overhaul, but when you add the lack of, I should say, or the change in standard deduction on top of an extra 3% in taxes, it adds up.
It does,
right?
It does,
and that's something that again isn't anything really we can do about it. That's just what our elected officials are determining what's best for us. Now, those brackets, so really the ones that affect the majority of us are 10% stays the same, 12 goes to 15, 22 to 25. I believe 24 to 28.
Yeah, sounds right.
Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's one thing with Ben, Colleen, myself, the advisors in the office is kind of playing with some of our clients is if we have somebody who's really looking at Roth conversions, is that's somebody to where we might get a little bigger of a conversion in the next 2 years to take advantage of what we know, which are the tax brackets today, so we don't get that big jump and increase in 2026 tax brackets. So that's something to keep in mind is if you're doing Roth conversions now, remember, if the next 2 years, if you have good rates, might do them if it's in your best interest and might kind of push it. But then look at, hey, post 2026, that's going to see a change in what the Roth conversions are for you. So,
and that's all stuff that can be and should be discussed now, right? With kind of the topic of today's podcast, more about what do we do year end, cleaning up this year, next year type deal.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we just have to work with our clients on and figure out. Right?
Yeah, and especially now, tax rates. You're going to get the new tax rates and kind of what the amounts are at the end of October, early November. You're going to see what you're going to have in 2025. But it's also time to say, hey, you know what? Can we get as much as we can with 401k at the end of the year, your employer sponsored plans? But also remember, if you don't get and max out the IRAs or Roths, remember you do have a couple months in the upcoming year to actually use that to your advantage for the previous year. So if we have somebody who doesn't max it out, who says, oh no, I forgot to max out my IRA by December, don't worry. In January, February, you can actually put money in that you can get credit for the year prior. So that's something to think about when we do end of the year tax planning, but also start of the year and what those may look like in 2025.
Yeah, and I think as we don't know 2025 brackets, it's fair for us to take a guess. And as we talked about last time, with the increase on Social Security being around 2.5, I think it's probably fair to assume that taxes are going to go up between 2.5, 2.8, somewhere in there. Ballpark is what we should see in terms of a increase on our tax brackets next year.
Absolutely.
So you talked a little bit about the 401k, maxing that out. Is it too late for someone to crank that up? We're in October, but it's not too late, is it?
Yeah, no, it's never too late. You just got to make sure, hey, what's the contribution limit? How much have I put in so far to my plan? And then how much access or leeway do I have to contribute that max? So we get a lot of people, honestly, with the year-end bonuses that say, hey, you know what? I didn't do a great job of doing the per pay to my 401k, but I want to take a portion or chunk of this money that I'm getting from a bonus and put it towards my 401k, or even right now with the Roth 401k being an advantageous option to where that could be something that you could look at really good. So what we tell our clients is maybe get with your HR or benefits to say, hey, you know what? I am getting a big one-time payment for an end of the year bonus. How can I defer some of this, all this, whatever it may be, into my 401k to have it benefit me for year end? So that's something to really take advantage of and to look at, especially if you're somebody who it kind of end loads either your salary, your pay, if you're 1099, that's something to really take advantage of to say, hey, you know what? I might not have done a great job the first 9 or 10 months, but let me really hit this hard in the months of November, December to where I can get a good contribution for that year.
And do you know the limits offhand?
Yeah, so it's right around like 23,500, 2024. That will should get a little bit of an increase 2025. And then if you're 50 and above, you should be a little bit above 30,000 if they have that catch-up provision in the 401k, 403b, stuff like that. So there is a really nice amount of money that you can put into that. And then if the situation presents itself, we always say it might not be in your best interest, but talk to HR and benefits to say, hey, do we have that Roth 401k option available? It's becoming more and more popular now. A lot of plans do now have that option available, but keep in mind, you just got to ask and say, hey, you know what? Is that available for me in my situation?
Well, especially if you can contribute north of 30K into a Roth, as opposed to 7 if you're under 50 and 8 if you're over in a Roth. So, you're talking almost 4 times the contribution limit that you're allowed to in a normal situation. So why not?
Which is huge. And also when you have to think about 401ks and Roth 401ks, there is an income limit. If you're single, you can only make so much money before they say, hey, you can't do a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
And Mary finally joins the same thing to say, hey, as a married filing joint couple, you can only make X amount of money before you actually cannot put into it at all. Remember, in Roth 401ks, there's no income discrimination to where you can make 20 grand or 20 million from that end.
Right.
That's something to where they don't look at income, except for if you're a highly compensated employee, they might run into that. But they're very much more applicable and easy to put into without many income limits.
Yeah, and I think something, just to pile on with that, the last bit is HSAs. Why not? Especially if you're looking at retiring early.
Yeah,
it's a great segue to plow some money into HSAs and beef those up. So that we can, if we retire, I'm talking pre-Medicare age, where we need to pay for some health insurance costs out of pocket.
Right.
That can help.
And that's one thing where we call it the triple tax benefit, meaning it goes in pre-tax, grows tax for that whole time. If it's taken out for qualified medical expenses, it's tax free. So there's not much like that in our world now. And even if you're post 65, that might be something to where if you do use it for just retirement, you just pay a normal income tax on it, not a penalty post 65. So we have a hard time believing, we always joke in our offices, is if you're retired, not many people are going to be pissed about having HSA money is medical expenses for people 65 and above come up. So that's something that's really nice to have, to where, I have this piece of money to where I know I always can pay for medical expenses out of this bucket instead of taking a big withdrawal.
Right. Or it makes it, it's not my expertise, but it also makes it, it gives you more options when it comes to choosing a true supplemental plan, or do we choose the Advantage plan? That's, could be free or a lot cheaper than the costly, supplemental plan, because we have a beefy HSA to cover that gap.
100%.
And then save you money out of pocket from the premium side of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the other thing we got to think of, as we enter our busy time of the year, and most of our retirees with IRAs, is, we got to take out the required minimum distributions. So talk a little bit about the RMDs, Dan, age-wise. Now we had some, a lot of rule changes on those, but we got to get those out here soon. Yeah.
So it used to be 70 and a half, then they changed to 72. And now it's actually based on your birth year. So you can be either 72, you have to take out your RMDs, 73, or actually 75. So that's something that is very important to make sure you're on top of, because there is very specific parameters as to if you have multiple IRAs, if you have an annuity, if you have a 403b, 401k, you got to make sure you take them out the right way, because it actually used to be, if you didn't take out the RMD, it used to be a 50% penalty.
Right.
Luckily, they dropped it down to only 25%. And I'm joking with Ben in our office, only 25 is still a crazy amount. And that's on top of income taxes. So we never want our client to miss RMDs, just because you're paying a crazy amount of penalty tax if you don't do that. So we got to be kind of top of mind with them. We look at it as more of November, because there's a lot of companies that say, hey, you have to get your RMDs in by this date, or there's not a guarantee that we'll process it by that time. So that's something to think about as year end, to say, hey, you know what? Talk with your advisor. We have clients talking to us all the time, really post October on, as to say, hey, you know what? How much have I taken out? How much do I have remaining? And when is the best time to actually take it? Do you spread it out? Do you take it all as a lump sum? That's kind of personal situation to see what's best for the client.
Yeah, and we do have a good guide that our clients can access about. It talks about 2024 tax planning, so really it's kind of like year-end planning type stuff that they have access to, and we'll have access to click on that and download that. The last thing that we I really want to cover today is the opportunity, which we won't get into because the guy that does most of it is not sitting here, but is the those after-tax investment accounts. Busy time for Keith in our office with tax loss harvesting potentials, and Dan, I'll let you briefly highlight that topic real quick, and why end of year is always a good time to look at that.
So tax loss harvest is important, because when you have an after-tax account, as you know, when you buy and sell, it creates a capital gain or capital loss. So what Keith really likes to do at the end of the year to say, hey, you know what? If Keith gets 7 out of 10 right, we have a great year, but we're always going to have a couple losers in there. So that's the time to really look at it is can we use those to our advantage to kind of pair against all the capital gains that are in that portfolio? Because if we can compare it to where it's even, that would be great, because then nobody would owe capital gains on it. So November, December is where we really take a look at it, because why we're able to do it at the end of the year is we kind of know what the client needs in income, and they've taken out most of their income that they've actually needed from us in the first 11 months. So we're not worried about a client saying, oh my gosh, I need another 5 to 10 grand.
Right.
That's not the case. So we really know, and we're really locked into what their income is for the year, and we can use tax loss harvesting to their advantage to really help them from a 1099 tax standpoint.
And it kind of lets us, evaluate some of these stocks that have run up a ton.
Right.
Your Magnificent Seven type names out there that we can maybe rebalance and say we're a little overweight in some of those names because they've run up so much. Maybe we grab some of those gains off the table and offset with any losses that we can on that side.
Yeah, that's where we always laugh with Keith is he's rocking and rolling back there in the months of November, December, just because there's a lot of things when it comes to getting it right and making sure we have all of our ducks in a row when it comes to capital gains, losses, and can we really squeeze the juice out of all of these losses that we have from that perspective with all the gains that we accrued over the 11, 12-month period.
For sure. And it's always relevant in a good year.
Absolutely.
Like 2024, there's might not be a lot of losses, but there's inevitably some. Not everything's up,
and that's the best part, Ben. And to the point, you're right about that. Is those are the years where 2022, we also might have some carryover loss from those years where it wasn't a great year in the market. So we might be able to pair some of those losses against some of the gains from the carryover from the previous couple of years. So that's the really cool thing with those taxable accounts is you get very, very in the weeds about what's the best thing to do when it comes to taxes.
Excellent. Well, anything else, Dan?
No, we look forward in our offices is our whole point is when it comes to politics, our job for our clients is to make money and to make sure they're in the best possible standpoint when it comes to taxes. So we do closely monitor what's going on in politics, and we know it'll be ever changing from our standpoint but we're trying to make sure sitting down with clients at the end of the year, making sure we take advantage of any tax laws that kind of point out for their situation to say, hey, you know what, this is the best way to go. So
I can't echo that enough. That's great advice. We can't advise on speculation. We just know the roadmap in front of us, and that's the way we're going to operate here. Is operate year by year and then adjust on the fly. And if you're not doing that, then or someone's not advising you to do that, then that's probably not good advice.
Absolutely.
So awesome. Thanks, Dan. Well, to wrap things up, if you guys have any questions for us, you can reach us at 330-473-1060. Check us out online, www.baschrock-fg.com. If you want us to talk about a specific topic or set up a time to discuss your situation, you can do so right through our website. Dan, appreciate the time, buddy, and we'll look forward to the next episode.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. Appreciate you.